Are you getting the most out of your organic shopping feed? Are you optimizing and making sure that your products are featured in Google in the right way? Well, here's Alex Wright to tell you why you should be doing that on this week's episode of Search with Candour.
It's a huge opportunity. Some people are taking advantage of them. I don't think some people are. I think some people are doing it by accident, which is what I see the most of, really, where you click that button in Merchant Center that allows you to opt into free shopping listings, but you've not read anything else. A lot of the presence that people might have in the free area of the shopping listings is probably not, it's probably accidental in a lot of cases. The one that I think people are going to talk about most at the moment is OpenAI or ChatGPT with the shopping feature that's come out there. What I found was that Google Lens is actually driving more revenue in some cases than ChatGPT. I think that the diversification of like platforms and sources is really interesting as well. One of the things that I've been looking into is almost the audience side of that. I think there's almost been a halo effect actually from ChatGPT in the way that it's almost training people to search and then leading back into Google as well. Query length is getting longer every single year, which is really interesting. And I think it looks like it accelerated quite a lot when LLMs started to come in.
Hello and welcome to Search with Candour, the podcast where I interview the best and brightest minds across SEO and digital marketing. My name is Jack Chambers Ward. I am your host as always, and this week I have a returning guest, the one and only Alex Wright, aka Wrighty. Alex and I talked a lot about basically headless CMS and stoicism last time. I know we all managed to fit that all into one episode last time, but this time Alex is joining me to talk about basically how we all are underutilizing organic shopping feeds and how to make the most out of your organic shopping feed. I think a lot of people see it as mostly a paid option. A lot of people see organic feeds as kind of a secondary thing to a lot of their e-commerce business. And Alex is here this week to basically explain why you should be prioritizing that and including it more heavily in your e-commerce strategies. Of course, Alex, like I said, is a returning guest, and I've got some fantastic guests coming up over the next few weeks as well. I've got another Alex next week, funnily enough. Alex Galinos will be joining me next week talking all about revenue-driven SEO strategies and SEO models, essentially talking a lot about how you can provide accountability and value for your SEO, and kind of on a similar subject, and it's a really nice little companion piece to the Alex episode. I will have Seb Atkinson, speaking of returning guests, for the third time on Search with Candour. I think, as far as I know, Seb is the only person who has been on the show with Mark, been on the show with me in audio form, and now is in person in the studio with me in full video form as well. And I believe all of those have been recorded in studio because Seb is local to us here in Norwich as well. Basically, Seb will be talking about his model for connecting revenue and traffic value and basically building a way to understand keyword clustering and how that all connects to proving the value of the traffic that you're bringing to your client and connecting it to revenue models and revenue tracking as well. So, like I said, Alex Wright coming up in a couple of minutes after a word from our sponsor, Alex Galinos next week, and Seb Atkinson at the end of August as well. If you haven't already, if you're not already excited by those guests, I don't know what to tell you. But if you are, please do subscribe down below. Follow us on Spotify. Give us 5 stars. Give us a like on YouTube and all that good stuff that helps spread the word of Candour. I would hugely appreciate any comments, any likes, any questions, anything like that in the comment down below. Of course, you can comment on Spotify as well. And I want to try a few different formats basically coming up over the next few weeks. I've got some interesting guests, like I said, some one-to-one interviews. We'll have the live podcast, of course, with Sarah Tasman and me from Brighton as well. I'm going to have a few more panel kind of shows like we did with the AI mode and AI search future stuff we were talking about recently as well. And I might even do some little extra news episodes and bonus episodes along the way as well. So stay tuned for some extra content over the next couple of months leading up to Brighton SEO in October. Oh, by the way, I'm speaking and moderating at Brighton SEO. So if you haven't already got your tickets, there is a link in the description down below if you want to go and get that with a discount code, by the way, so you can go and get your tickets and come and join me on the 23rd and 24th of October in Brighton. Come and see me speak about what I think the future of content is in the era of 0 clicks that I think we're heading towards at the moment. And also, I've got an MMA fight coming up. I know, seems silly, right? I'm fighting for charity in November, supporting a local mental health charity here in Norwich called Norfolk Clubhouse. And yeah, I'm middle of training. I'm covered in bruises and going okay so far, I think, hopefully. But yes, I will put a link for that if you want to go and support that. I would hugely appreciate any money you can donate to that cause as well. And I know a few people have contacted me about tickets. Tickets will be going on sale in September when I properly start my training camp. That's going to be 8 weeks before the fight, and the fight itself is on the 21st of November. So I'm going to have a busy October and November, to say the least. Anyway, I will stop rambling. I hugely appreciate your time. I appreciate you if you don't just skip through the intro like so many people do. Here is a word from our sponsor, and I'll get straight into my conversation with Alex Wright, all about organic shopping feeds. This week's episode is sponsored by Fatjoe. Since 2012, Fatjoe have been the world's highest rated provider of outsourced digital marketing services, and their productized services help SEOs, marketing teams, and agencies not only scale, but thrive as well. And they have a workspace designed for outsourcing efficiency. Basically, it's the no-hassle way to get your SEO work done. Fatjoe offers over 20 different services ranging from blogger outreach, digital PR campaigns, to content writing, and even design and video as well. So if you need the hassle taken out of a time-consuming task like blogger outreach, then Fatjoe might be the perfect solution for you. Plus, it's 100% manual outreach. That's no PBNs, by the way, and there are no hidden fees. What you pay for is exactly what you get, and there are no extra charges. Plus, it's all 100% white label. There are no contracts, no minimum spend, no tie-ins. You are fully in charge of what you pay for and the services you use. But don't take my word for it. Fatjoe is rated 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot and has over 1,500 reviews on Shopper Approved. Plus, they give you 100% satisfaction and money back guarantee on your first order. If that doesn't say confidence in your product and service from Fatjoe, I don't know what does. So if you're ready to get started, please do sign up using the link down below and create your free account today. Thank you so much to Fatjoe for sponsoring us here at Search with Candour. Now, back to the episode. My guest this week has over 10 years of experience in digital marketing, and during his career he's worked with a huge range of brands, including household names like Panasonic and Iceland. He's spoken at some of the best SEO conferences around the UK, including Brighton SEO, where I saw him talk a few years ago. He is a managing partner for SEO at Dentsu and is making his triumphant return to the show after 3 years away. Welcome back to the show, Alex Wright.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back. I can't believe it's been 3 years already.
I know, right? We were just talking about it before we started recording. It was May of 2022, and we're recording this in May of 2025. It's literally been 3 years since you and I last sat down. I think we saw each other a couple of times at Brighton, and it was literally, oh, hello, mate, see you later. Like, you were running off in one direction, I was going off, and I was like, that's it.
Yeah, the standard meet at Brighton.
I know, right? Yeah, classic British busy people to be like, oh, hello, see you later, and tip of the hat, sir, and then off we go.
Yeah.
But we have a very interesting topic to talk about, and weirdly enough, it kind of mirrors in many ways what we talked about last time. And we talked about headless CMS and somehow also stoicism in the same conversation. I think we managed to make it work. And now we're talking about something I know you're very passionate about. You've got a talk coming up that you're preparing at the moment about organic shopping feeds and how people are probably not using them properly, and what we think the future of shopping on Google and organic search is going to look like as well. So we're going to kind of almost split the episode in half and talk about the present and how to do it right, and then some speculation, tinfoil hat stuff for the future as well.
Yeah, perfect.
So let's get stuck in, I guess. And kind of leaves me with that first question of, why do you think organic shopping feeds are important? Why do you think people are not doing enough with them at the moment?
So, I mean, to me, they're massively important, obviously, for e-com businesses specifically. But like, if you look at like studies that a lot of people have done, you're looking at maybe 30 to 40% of product search traffic is going through shopping ads or shopping listings on Google, so quite a significant amount. We at Dentsu track quite a lot of keywords as well, so hundreds of thousands of keywords. It's an average of about 25 to 30% trigger shopping listings of some form. So whatever, the traditional shopping listings, or maybe some variants on those as well. So there's a significant amount of SERPs that are being taken up by those, and sometimes that can hit 55%, which is huge, and obviously a massive thing for e-com brands. So I think just in general, in terms of landscape, there's a big amount of real estate that is really heavily transactional, that has a decent CTR as well from what we've seen, that people should be taking advantage of, really. And there's loads of other things that I guess would prompt you to maybe start looking at shopping. One thing actually is really specific, actually, but there's a piece of legislation coming in October. It's for the HFSS legislation, so high fat, salt, sugar foods will be restricted in terms of what you can advertise on. So you can actually still get into shopping listings for those, but you won't be competing with shopping ads as of sort of October and beyond. So any brands that sort of fall into that bucket as well, they could really take advantage of organic shopping, try and boost their presence now. And then when advertising starts becoming a little bit more tricky in those sorts of areas, they might see that they can get a decent amount more visibility as well. So it's like, to me, it's generally quite important. But then also there's certain industries, I think, that are going to see a big positive impact because of just the way that sort of their sector is moving, or the way that things are moving for their industry. So yeah, I think to me, it's a huge opportunity. There's some people are taking advantage of them. I don't think some people are. I think some people are doing it by accident, which is what I see the most of, really, where you just sort of, you click that button in Merchant Center that allows you to opt into free shopping listings, but you've not really done anything else. And a lot of people are being shown up that way. And I think Google is also pretty good these days at reading structured data, reading content on PDPs, and understanding what needs to be pulled into shopping listings. So again, a lot of the presence that people might have in the free area of the shopping listings is probably not, well, it's probably accidental in a lot of cases, maybe not in every case, but yeah, it's fascinating sort of space to be in at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think a lot of people are aware that it's a thing, right? But not quite sure of how does my site do that? How would it end up actually connecting and pulling through the right information? And exactly, you said there, a lot of people end up doing it accidentally. I have totally done that for a client in the past from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Ended up and having that conversation with them, and then had another e-commerce client since I joined Candour, and I told them you could actually have organic results in the shopping feed, and they were like, well, no, that's all paid stuff, right? It's like, no, it's both, which is one of the very few spaces where you're literally experiencing both paid and organic at the same time. And that will very much tie into much of the conversation later on, I'm sure, because you mentioned visibility there, right? I think that's a key element to that layout of the SERP, the literal layout of the results. And because I think it sits at the top and you see the little carousels and you can scroll along and click and all that kind of stuff, it seems like a paid feature. And I think a lot of people maybe are just assuming that and don't check, or are intimidated by, oh God, how much do I have to pay to get featured and stuff like that. But if you're doing it right, and like I said, we've had success stories with clients here at Candour of being able to do that kind of thing and being like, actually, you can do it relatively cheaply, not including, development time and adding and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it really, like you said, ends up being an opportunity a lot of people miss because they just don't look into it, or are intimidated by it, or assume it's the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think that assumption is a huge thing. So a lot of people do think it's very much just paid advertising, which, yeah, I mean that is fundamentally part of Google Ads and paid ads campaigns. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to learn from your paid search counterparts as well. So it primarily at the moment probably will be more useful and more important to paid search teams. But I do think that organic teams should be getting involved, at least trying to understand the mechanisms and what's possible, and maybe just trying to have a bit of a back and forth on how they can both help each other as channels as well. So I think in previous sort of lives, I've worked with paid search teams on even just how products are named in the feed and named on the site as well, to try and make them a little bit more enticing for shopping listings, and just try and to improve CTR and things like that. So there's even little things that you can do there just to try and get a bit more au fait with how everything works. But yeah, I definitely would like to squash that sort of that thought that it's just a paid search thing.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, actually, because I kind of came at it from the competitive angle, right? Of like, this is where you can compete organically and paid. But you're totally right. This is an opportunity for your paid and organic teams to work together and actually customize it a little bit more and really control what you're saying and how your products are being seen by users and potential customers. And I also really like what you said earlier about that specific example. There are going to be certain ways in certain industries and certain brands that are going to benefit from this more. And for me, I think stuff like legislation is always interesting. I know you and I were talking about the European Accessibility Act a few weeks ago as well. Like, there's so much stuff that is changing, and again, we'll get to it in the second half with a lot of the latest updates. But I think a lot of legislation stuff is struggling to keep up with a lot of the technological stuff, and we're all paying attention to that. We're all bombarded with all the latest like European Commission announcements or trials that are going on with all the big data companies and tech companies and stuff. But actually, boots on the ground, food industry is affected by legislation. Like sports equipment stuff is affected by various different things, and a lot of that stuff you really don't think about. It was something I was talking about on SEO is not voodoo with Tom Marriott the other day. There was this element of zoom out and see the bigger picture. That was like my one big, like, if you take anything away from this conversation, don't forget to zoom out. Don't just focus on just your organic results, let alone that. Think about the world around you. Literally, what is financially happening in the world? What is legally happening, politically, culturally, all this kind of stuff. Because obviously, we all went through the pandemic. Most people, I assume, listening and viewing were working in digital marketing at the time. And we all know how much stuff changed at the blink of an eye. And I love that you're like already getting ahead of being like, well, this is coming up in October. If you start now, you're going to get that step ahead. You're going to be 10 steps ahead of some competitors who aren't even aware of what's going on, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, there's certain restricted industries, like you said, that will already have stuff in place. But yeah, it's good to get ahead of, like I said, I really like that, zoom out a little bit and really understand what's coming for, certain markets and certain industries, and then how you can sort of transfer that over to organic. But I think it's probably something that paid marketers have probably been a bit more up to date with in previous years, because obviously the nature of advertising is a bit more strict when it comes to restricted products or legislation and things like that. And I guess organic has been able to fly under the radar in some cases. Feign ignorance maybe when things are showing up where they shouldn't. But yeah, I think it's definitely something to be much more aware of, particularly as we move into a much more competitive space in the future. I'm trying not to go on too much of the future stuff, but
I know, yeah. But we're just teasing it every now and then.
Yeah.
So to carry on with that, if people are listening and thinking, okay, maybe I should start thinking about talking to my e-commerce clients, or they're working in-house and want to have that conversation with the team, where should they start when it comes to actually implementing this stuff and actually getting a shopping feed set up for one of their e-commerce sites?
So there's two ways to look at it, really. There's a basic one, which is opted into those free listings in Google Merchant Center. A lot of people do that, and it's been around for a number of years. That sort of functionality has been there. It's been called a few different things, I think, over the course of the last few years. But that's the easiest way to get into it. And then off the back of that, that's where you need to be starting to chat to your paid search team and understanding how you can have an impact on what's being put into that feed, how that feed works, what you need to do to try and make sure that everything runs smoothly with that, and how we may be able to optimize things to improve the presence in organic listings. That's the basic way. There is a much more advanced way of looking at this. It's specifically for businesses in the EU, as far as we can tell anyway. There is actually a way to run two feeds concurrently. And that's something that is probably, I think a lot of people have struggled with in the past, because a lot of the time in the past, you've had to just have a paid shopping feed, but there is a way to run a second feed that can be specifically just organic. It is at the moment a bit of a workaround. Our team, there's a team far smarter than me that are working on the implementation of that. But that is actually possible for a lot of businesses. So you can theoretically run a second organic feed, and then therefore you're not crossing over as much with paid. You're not having to make any compromises. Paid don't have to compromise for organic, for example. And organic can be a bit more free with what they do as well. So there is another way of doing that. As far as I understand, that's a bit more of a specialized case, but it is definitely possible with the right support and working with I guess some of the feed management tools and partners But yeah, there's those are sort of two ways that you can look at that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one when you're running those two currently. I've not done that myself, but I've heard rumors that it's possible.
Yeah.
Heard myths and legends, and again, come around to a conversation I had with Chris Ridley a few weeks ago. That nature of, again, I think maybe it's us being organic, heads in the sand kind of people. Like, we're so focused on our own thing, you kind of forget to think what the paid side is doing, right? And you can end up cannibalizing each other. And there's a whole conversation, which is that podcast I did with Chris, that is whether you should be paying for things you're already ranking for and vice versa. What's the cutoff point? If you're ranking number one, should you be bidding on that term as well? Or is it worth having both and like just completely owning that sub? You can see it both ways, right? But I think when you can come at it from both perspectives on the feed side of things, you can really kind of nail down the organic offering and then also have a paid that supplements it, or vice versa, right? If you're really driving some brilliant revenue and clicks and stuff like that from your paid side of things, you can do little extra bits and pieces and test a new product range or try a few new bits and pieces on that little organic feed, get some performance data, like, yeah, actually, let's do that. I know a lot of people do it the other way around, where they will test with paid first and then before implementing organic, because you obviously get such fast feedback for paid compared to organic.
Yeah, I think I guess the incrementality of paid and organic is yeah, quite an interesting one. I wish that there's studies that were done maybe 10, 15 years ago now, which makes me feel a lot older than I am. But they sort of looked at the incrementality of pausing ads on certain SERPs, certain keywords, and how that impacts brand and non-brand. I'd love to see more studies like that, but there was some interesting findings on those, particularly the discrepancy between what the types of queries and how that impacts the incrementality of ads. But yeah, like you said, with shopping, there's just a huge sort of opportunity there to take up a lot of real estate and not cannibalize each other and not step on each other's toes, but actually try different forms of optimization and then see what works, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to that implementation side of things, you'll often get, again, having this experience with ecom clients in the past, you get bogged down with what should we include, what shouldn't we include, how much detail should be going into, all this kind of stuff, right? For you, what are kind of the easiest ways to get that feed up and running and actually just getting the ball rolling and started, right?
Yeah, so the way to get feed up and running, there's a few different ways, I guess. The easiest and most accessible way is if you're on Shopify. Shopify has a direct link with Merchant Center. It's all native, so makes it really easy to add those feeds, and then it's just a case of just tweaking what needs to be in there and what doesn't. And then there's typically the typical setup would be something like an XML file or a CSV file that you can create in something like Google Sheets or Excel with a lot of different columns and information on products, which is what I've seen a lot of times in the past. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. I think, if you're not on Shopify, you will be looking at like XML or CSV format. I guess the problem with those is it's really clunky and hard to maintain things sometimes. It's not exactly the best user interface to have to do it in a sheet or an Excel doc. So one thing that you can do is use third-party tools for feed management. I don't really have many recommendations in that arena. I do tend to I've used quite a few, and I do think there are some good ones. Optimise is one that I've used in the past. Process, I think is how you pronounce it, is another one. So there's a few different ones, but they all do fundamentally the same thing, is allow you to just edit attributes with your feed, update things at scale, analyze things at scale, and be a bit more robust in your reporting as well. So I guess those sort of tools are something I'd try and put in place if you are going to be running the feed. But like I said, if you're on Shopify, you've got a bit of a leg up already in the sense that it's a little bit less technical. It's a little bit less heavy on the data to start off with, and you've got that ability to just connect natively to Google. I realize I'm talking quite a lot about Google at this point as well, but there are a lot of other places that you can submit shopping feeds. So obviously you've got other platforms. That the one that I think people are going to be talking about most at the moment is OpenAI or ChatGPT with the shopping feature that's come out there. But there looks like there might be a way to submit feeds to that in the future. So
they're officially partnered with Shopify. They've announced that, so that's already interesting, right?
Yeah, that'll be a direct integration for sure, and then probably the ability for other people to upload maybe a more manual feed. So yeah, I guess that's the way I look at getting set up. There's guidance on Google in Google's documentation on how those files need to be formatted, what kind of things need to be included and how to sort of do that from a much more granular, practical perspective. But yeah, that's kind of like the overall view as to how you get a feed up and running.
I'll put a link to the documentation in the show notes, folks, if you do want to go and check it out and do it. We won't just read Google documentation for the next 20 minutes, don't worry. I'll let you go and read it in your own time. And I think, yeah, that often comes with, like you said, kind of being stuck. And again, we're totally guilty of this in SEO and organic. Like Google is the be all and end all, right? And I think a lot of us have had a big kick up the arse wake up call over the last 18 months, couple of years or so. And I think a lot of the discussions about market share and all that kind of stuff are a bit exaggerated, but there is definitely momentum. There is definitely a trend forming. And again, coming back to the legislation and legal side of things, with all the antitrust stuff that the Department of Justice is doing in the US and how they might have to divest Chrome or whatever, that could be a really significant shift for Google side of things. So I think I'm really happy you brought that up. As soon as you mentioned Shopify integrating, I was like, oh, ChatGPT. And I was about to ask you, and you mentioned it. You beat me to it.
Yeah, great minds. But yeah, I think that the diversification of like platforms and sources is really interesting as well. I mean, one of the things that I've sort of been looking into, I guess, and really sort of captivated by is almost the audience side of that. So is it certain audiences that are going to that might prefer shopping on ChatGPT versus Google? So it's that kind of thing to consider as well, because I'd imagine there's some people that still don't trust LLMs and won't use those, or they'll use traditional search or try and use that. So, but you might have, well, I guess, people that are more savvy with tech that might want to buy out of there, and therefore shopping presence in ChatGPT is a bit more important. But yeah, definitely that diversification and of platforms is something people should probably consider over the coming years.
100%. Yeah, I think that's essential. Like kind of what we said 10 minutes ago, like get ahead of it. Don't wait until everyone is using a thing to then jump on. If you can be in there first and carving the path, that's a great way to get some really significant numbers early days. And I think a lot of what we're seeing, really interesting you mentioned depending on the audience of the platform there, because I think that has been such a big discussion in the industry recently, and something I keep, for want of a better phrase, to talk about with the normies. You know what I mean, Alex? Like,
Yeah,
I'm like our partners and friends and family and all that kind of stuff. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. I did my usual, have you seen all the mad stuff that Google is doing? And I was like, no. Like, oh God, okay. I have just been inundated with that nonsense. That's all I'm thinking about at the moment. And it was a really interesting conversation where, like, the shift of the actual nature of how we search. I know you and I are similar-ish age, Alex, where it comes to, we remember a time before the internet, right? We remember a time, let alone before Google, before the internet. I remember when we got our first computer with a modem in our house. I remember the first phone with WAP and 1G and 2G, let alone 5G and smartphones and stuff. And there's a really interesting kind of like psychological thing, and there's been a few studies around where you're exactly right. You see a certain kind of group of people who adopt ChatGPT, and exactly as you said as well, you see a lot of people who are very skeptical and distrusting of LLMs and AI and that kind of stuff. And it seems to be kind of two big factors, and they're very significantly linked, is age range, like
yeah.
generation essentially, and technological knowledge essentially.
But
And I think there's a fascinating thing. I have seen a couple of studies. It seems fairly wishy-washy to me, but it's believable enough that younger generations, so I'm about to turn 35, I'm a firmly millennial, and there's that Gen Z, Gen Alpha generation who are actually less technologically aware than we are, because they didn't go through that embryonic stage of the internet, right? They didn't have to learn how to boot up a dot matrix printer or how to reset a modem or all this kind of stuff, right? There's no, they just, oh, Wi-Fi is everywhere all of the time, and I'm just on a smartphone and everything is massively intuitive. And for me, the interesting thing for search from that point of view is the interface like ChatGPT. And my wife said it yesterday, and I was like, I have heard plenty of people say that. I was not expecting my wife to say this. It feels like you're talking to a person. And I was like,
yeah,
oh no, yeah, that is, it's so, in theory, as a user, it is a lower friction experience, right? It is so much easier, and I think can be a positive thing for younger people coming straight in and just using it natively. People who are born, this decade or the previous decade or whatever, are never going to Google something the way you and I have been Googling things for 20 years.
Yeah.
Best blue t-shirt, size 14. Like, you do weird non-sentence search query type things, and you can just talk to a thing and ask it a question, it gives you results. Is such a fundamental change. And then if you can get an idea of what kind of audience do you have the kind of audience that is wanting a frictionless, are they technologically savvy, are they keen on trying new things like ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., or are they fuddy-duddies like me and still want to use Google? Like, that's a whole audience research thing I think a lot of people don't really factor into it. You always do sort of like wages and age and location and stuff. Like, yeah, but what technology do you use and how do you use it is a massive question that I feel like I've never seen written down on an audience research and market research paper.
No, now you mentioned that, I don't think I can. Yeah, I don't think I can think of that either. It's a really
Are you
interesting.
regularly like a new technology adopter? Do you often have the latest smartphone? That kind of stuff, right? It's just little things.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, just to go back to what you talked about in terms of like the types of queries that have been mentioned and stuff. That there's something that I think there's almost been a butterfly effect from, or I say a halo effect actually from ChatGPT in the way that it's almost training people to search and then sort of bleeding back into Google as well. So I think I've seen it from a couple of accounts that I've worked on where query length is getting longer every single year, which is really interesting. And I think it looks like it accelerated quite a lot when LLMs started to come in. Obviously, it's going to depend on audience for those queries, but broadly speaking, quite a few of the accounts I've looked at, that query length is getting longer and longer because, and like I said, I think that's being sort of accelerated by LLMs coming as well.
I think we're seeing that on the paid side of things as well, right? You're seeing no exact match, no broad match, just AI max, search max, P max, just match something, match intent, which again, something we've been saying on organic for a long time. Like, I feel a lot of the best SEOs have been saying, worry about search intent, not keywords, for the last decade. And now it seems, are we heading towards an era of a keywordless internet, right? Where it's just, how could you possibly get search volume for the way I search for something and the way you search for something? Like, we're from the same country, we're roughly the same age, we work in the same industry, but we're from different parts of the country and totally different backgrounds. So you and I would word things, tiny little colloquialisms and shifts, and you have a different t-shirt size than I do, and all these little bits and pieces that suddenly add up to, oh, I'm looking for the best blue t-shirt for size XL for me, blah, 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 blah. And you would word that in a completely different way. So what is the search volume of that thing? It's everything is zero because keywords just diverge from each other. No keywords.
And don't even get me started on the personal contact stuff that got announced last week.
Oh yeah.
That makes it even more complex.
We'll get to that in the second half.
yeah, definitely.
So let's keep us on the present just for a few more minutes. And I guess want to think about the most common mistakes you're seeing. You said you're working with a lot of clients and seeing regular things of just not utilizing it properly or misunderstanding it and things like that. Are there a kind of like golden rule best practices that people should be following? And then are there kind of like the counterbalance of that, of like the most common mistakes you see?
Yeah, I guess I can group those into like 3 areas as well. So the first one really is just making sure things are set up properly. It sounds really basic, but there's a lot of attributes that you've got access to in a feed and a lot of things that you can add. And a lot of people just don't make the most of those. They'll add the basics and maybe not expand on that. But there's things like even down to the categorization, you can really drill down into categories for certain products. So people not really utilizing that is a bit of an issue that I've seen quite a few times. But even just optimizing the title, the description, and just understanding that, like, or trying to get the highest quality input you can into a feed, that's the basic stuff. The other thing, I guess it's a bit more technical, that caused me no end of headaches a couple of years ago, is the content on your site matching the feed, and specifically structured data. So working with, we talked about headless in the past, but working with headless sites, this was quite an issue for me. For, again, very specific client. I'm reliving some past experiences here. But like, for example, where rendering comes in, if structured data is being controlled by rendering, so say like the stock is being rendered in after the initial load, or certain attributes are being rendered in and they don't match what's in the feed, that can cause some massive issues with disapprovals in the feed. So that's something to be aware of if you are running a really JavaScript heavy site, or if you are running a headless site. Though that sort of thing is quite common, and I say particularly from like a stock perspective. So I think that's something to try and bear in mind. And then just structured data in general, just trying to get that right is something that people don't necessarily think of in terms of being related to feeds. But the fact that sometimes they don't match can cause us issues. So that I guess that's another one I would pull out. And then just content not matching what you're actually advertising as well, or what you're actually putting into your product feed. So where you've got certain titles or descriptions that you're trying to feed to people through the shopping tab, if people click through those and land on your page and get a bit of something different, I mean, it's basic SEO. It's not just related to shopping, but it does transfer over. So you want to make sure that what is in the feed and what's being advertised is matching the content on the page, so users aren't seeing like discrepancies, or they're not getting confused. That's even things like imagery as well. I've seen it in the past where images and feeds have actually been more up to date sometimes than the site, and they've caused some friction for users. So yeah, those sort of things, I guess, are the ones that stand out to me, I think, are the issues.
Yeah, definitely. I've totally seen. I know whether it's intentional or not, ends up feeling like clickbait, right? When you click on an ad and it feels like something completely different, and there is plenty of spammy, dropshippy, Temu-y, AliExpress type stuff that is full of that kind of thing. Like, you can get it now for 50p, and then you click on it and it's some £30 version of it or whatever it is. But yeah, you're totally right. When you're trying to do it legit and being honest about it, I think there are enough attributes in there that you might just forget that, oh, that changed, or this shifted, or whatever it is. Imagery being a perfect example you just used. Like, oh, we updated the main feed. We've updated the site, but not the main feed, or vice versa. And how many times have you been waiting for product imagery to get updated, and then, oh, I forgot to upload it to the second, third, fourth, fifth place it needs to be. It needs to go on the social stuff as well. It needs to do this, needs to do that. Like, we said at the start, right? Making sure everyone is communicating with each other, everyone's on the same page, is so important to, like you said, SEO, digital marketing in general.
Yeah, it's such a basic thing that you've got a lot of control over, that it's just an easy thing to implement in theory. But actually getting teams to talk to each other and work with each other is obviously a bit of a different kettle of fish sometimes. I guess the one thing I didn't mention there as well is that you have the opportunity to add supplemental feeds as well. So sometimes they can be quite useful. So it allows you to like modify attributes in your primary feed, or add things like sale prices and things like that. You can be a bit more dynamic with that sort of stuff. So people not making use of supplemental feeds, I think, is probably another thing I'd add to that list. But that is more of that's less of a best practice thing, and then a basics thing, and more of a how do you amplify what you're currently doing as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff would be, like you said, that little supplemental extra bonus bits. We've seen a lot of new SERP features being introduced. Like you said, the discount side of things, the sales side of things, price comparison stuff, literally on the SERPs as well. And this is even before we get into AI stuff. This is all just straight up actual organic feeds. And it amazes me how often, like, I know Brody Clark does a brilliant job of keeping track of all, like, a literal timeline of Google tested this thing, Google tested this thing, and between Brody and Barry Schwartz, it's just like every little thing they changed the size of the label, or the color of the thing, or the highlight of the text, and all this kind of stuff. Google is constantly testing and twisting and trying new things, and I think a lot of us aren't paying attention to little bits like that you can do, like you said, through structured data. When you're getting those rich results on the feed or on the main organic listings, you can add bits of information that could be the difference between somebody clicking and not clicking, that is not the on-page content, that is not even your page title or your imagery or anything like that. But me saying, oh, it's on sale, is such like marketing 101 psychology stuff, right?
Yeah, it's such a useful thing to have, and that granular level of control. I mean, it's something like it can really set you apart from competition and make you a little bit more clickable in search, particularly when, like you said, those features like price comparison are there, they're available, and people are going to be using those to make decisions.
Yeah, definitely. So are we ready? you feeling ready, Alex? You need a stretch? Are we feeling ready to dive into AI mode and get stuck in?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would sort
Oh,
of
please, yeah.
point out before we go through is the one thing that a lot of people don't really talk about because it's not as, I guess, popular, it's not as wide as Merchant Center, as Manufacturer Center as well. So just for any brands that are
Yeah, yeah.
listening, so that there is a feature called Manufacturer Center as well, which you don't advertise through that. You still advertise through Merchant Center. But if you are actually a brand, or you create or you make a certain brand, you can sign up to Manufacturer Center. And what that does is gives you a lot more visibility and control over your product information. So you can add much more rich information on your products, regardless of what else is in other people's merchant centers and feeds. You can see your brand performance against other brands as well, which is really, really useful. But one thing that I think is really cool that a lot of people probably wish they had that sort of data is being able to compare product performance across sort of merchant centers. So looking at things
Cool,
like
yeah.
what products are trending or what's performing really well. And one thing that I've seen brands fall foul of in the past is the price changes as well. So if you're what the differences are between prices for certain products. So there might be if you're a brand, there might be at one retailer that's selling it at X price, there might be another one that's selling it at Y price, and you might be actually selling it at a much higher price than both of them. I have actually worked with brands in the past where the price of the product for the brand has been much more expensive than the retailers, and therefore there's no point in going to the brand to buy. So those sorts of things, those sorts of reports are really, really useful. But yeah, that's just a note for brands, really. Manufacturer Center is a thing. Use it. It's free. Works really well,
Yeah,
and it can give you a lot of insight.
definitely. Yeah, thank you for that, mate. I appreciate that. Like you said, there's always an extra little bit or an extra thing that can fundamentally change one industry or one brand or one client or whatever it is. And that might not apply to everybody, but that can be a massive deal to that one. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. I can just,
Yeah.
like you said, have so much more control. And if you are doing manufacturing and being more in control, that could be really, really useful. So thank you for keeping me at that and keeping up to date. Now, let's do it. Let's get stuck in.
Yeah.
And oh, yeah. So you mentioned personalized SERPs earlier. We'll touch on that. But I think the main things for me when it comes to the new shopping features, it's going to be price tracking. I think is really interesting. I mentioned a couple of SERP features are kind of doing a bit of price comparison at the moment. You've got the virtual try-on stuff for a lot of the clothing and that kind of thing as well. And then the whole side of agentic search and we can buy your tickets for you, we can make purchases for you kind of thing. I guess we'll start with price tracking because I think that's maybe the easiest one to understand and the easiest one to kind of think about when we kind of do that very naturally as humans, I think anyway. Do you think that's going to shape the way the feeds work as well? Do you think like the way we know like the shopping graph stuff ties into what they've discussed about AI mode and how that relates to the feed, how that's going to tie into what AI mode is doing? Do you think that is very much going to be an opt-in or get left behind kind of situation?
Yeah, I think so. I think with any of this sort of stuff, it's probably that you want to take advantage of those new features and try and make sure that you're providing that sort of information. I think that the price tracking thing is really useful for users, and people will be using that for decisions. Like the agentic search part of that, I think is really, really profound, and I think that there will be a lot of things that brands can do to try and to try and get involved with that.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by because we've obviously seen so many hallucinations and wrong information and misinformation and stuff like that. I think Lily Ray is sharing about 30 a day at this point on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, just like, yeah, this one's wrong and this one's wrong. And today is not that date and all this kind of super basic information. My worry is that if you're doing stuff like price tracking or price comparison and all that kind of stuff, and even agentic search, I brought it up on the episode with Mark a few months ago. That was like, if agentic search can do basically the whole process for you, do you trust it enough to stick to your restrictions? Right? Obviously it notifies you a couple of times throughout that process. It doesn't just go and buy me the thing and you have no more input. But if you're setting a budget and you're setting restrictions on it, is it going to stick to that? Could it accidentally misclick? And then how does that work from a customer perspective, a legal perspective, right? There's so many elements to that. And I know Sundar Pichai, the podcast I've already recommended a couple of times, Decoder by the Verge, do a brilliant interview with Sundar straight away after each Google I/O. And Nilay was talking about that, and Sundar said, I think we're moving towards an agentic search landscape. Like by the end of maybe not this year, maybe next year, maybe in a couple of years, you probably were doing a lot less actual searching and clicking around, and agents are going to do a lot of the work for you. And as a user, sounds great, lovely. But I guess my question for you, Alex, is then like, how are you thinking about that and kind of, I'm not going to say you're future proofing. I don't want you to like, we're doing this exact strategy for the next 2 years or whatever. But when you're thinking about that and kind of possibly forecasting and having those kind of conversations with clients, what is that kind of process of how do you think about agentic search and how that might affect ecom clients and shopping feeds and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think when it comes to, I guess, e-commerce clients, they've got a little bit more control than a lot of other people in certain ways in the new SERP landscape or what AI mode looks like, because you can actually submit data through the feed directly to Google. And when it comes to agentic search, like you said, there could be hallucinations on a lot of things. I guess maybe I'm being hopelessly optimistic here. What I would hope is that it will try and respect the data that you are feeding through to it via your shopping feed, via your structured data. I think the thing that brands and agencies are going to need to really get their heads around is how that needs to transfer in today's day work, like making sure those sort of things are really up to date, that there's systems in place to track those much more granularly, to report and monitor on things that might be wrong. Because sometimes, again, like we go back to like discrepancies with data from structured data for feeds, for example. The first time you might hear about that in a lot of cases is just a disapproval in the shopping feed, which isn't usually that instant. And agents, depending on how they work, could be a little bit more instant than that. So they might be looking at those real-time changes. So you might have a feed that says that your product is X price, and there's an agent waiting to buy it when it goes to a certain price, and then your schema on your site for some reason might malfunction. There might be something wrong with it, and it might actually give you a wrong price that the agent is then looking out for, essentially, and it could then try and move through that purchase process based on an incorrect price. I think that's the thing for me. It's data quality, the speed of update, speed of monitoring, but a lot of speculation at this point, I guess, is it's just, for me, those are the things that I think we should be focusing on straight away, and just trying to get right as things start to develop and we can start to see how things are playing out.
Yeah, it comes back to what you said earlier, right? Of like having that consistency of data across your various different platforms and sources. Yeah, if it's going to pull from paid and organic and your main site content or however it's going to do it, the taking from the shopping graph as well, if they're not matching up, that could cause some serious problems. And then, like you said, if it ends up pulling the cheaper price or the more expensive price from one source and then from a different source and is serving up two different things, and again, in theory, using you and I as an example, we could search for the exact same thing, ever slightly different wording. You get it 100 quid cheaper than I do, even though the actual price is 100 quid more. How does that work? What does that mean? Like, who is liable for that kind of stuff? What is Google then responsible to pay, like, you as the retailer the money back, or is it sorry, you should have given us the right data in time? Like, tough. There's so many questions in that side of things for me, where, and even there was I know they officially announced a few partners they're going to work with specifically, and it's rolling out with agentic search, starting with tickets specifically. I think it almost feels like it's a good example, right, for Google to use, as like everybody kind of knows what a ticket is, and that's a nice little family-friendly way of explaining it. It's like, we're not going to go into launching 100 different things at once. And for me, partnering with Ticketmaster is pretty controversial in 2025 because Ticketmaster are in a lot of hot water. All the dynamic pricing stuff that they do blows my mind that is just okay these days. I have a real like old man shouts at cloud moment every time I see any concert tickets, and I'm just like, back in my day I could go to Wembley for £40. It's like, no, £250, granddad. Tough. Like, you're stuck with it.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. Like I guess the trust that we're having to put in brands or put in those sort of relationships between Google and the brands they might work with, like I said, Ticketmaster, who show themselves to not be as on the side of people who want cheaper tickets. I think that's a big thing, and it's going to take a lot for users to trust that. And I think that there probably is going to be a bit of maybe a slower adoption for some people because of that. You would hope as well that there's the people that are a bit more au fait with how dynamic pricing works and are a little bit more against it would at least, morally be taking a bit of a stand against agentic search for tickets and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, like you said as well, the speed of the data retrieval, I think, is a really interesting question. If dynamic pricing is changing by the second, by the minute, essentially, as people are, I've literally, I was trying to buy Lady Gaga at the O2 tickets for my wife a few weeks ago, and we had me, my wife, her mum, and another friend of ours all just like frantically clicking away, hoping for the best. Like, if you got a seat here, you've got a seat on the phone. We're like, you got a seat here? No, just like frantically clicking away. Oh, this one's 120, this one's 150, this one's 200. They're all in the same row. It's all just like literally changing before your eyes, and you don't often see that kind of stuff. I feel like we're so used to a static web, a reasonably static web, and dynamic stuff, which is very much what we're seeing with AI mode and things like that, for me is kind of scary. Like you said, if you're trying to do something that is going to be involving your money, or God forbid, maybe we get to the medical side of things and they fully do the whole YMYL kind of coverage, you could be making big financial decisions or medical decisions based on stuff that is either changing too quickly for Google to keep up with, or not changing quickly enough. So where is that sweet? Maybe I'm massively misunderstanding. I fundamentally do not understand how this stuff works. This is all speculation, obviously, but there's a lot of wiggle room for error there, right? And maybe it's my naivety. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm hoping that we'll get more clarity on it as things start to roll out. But I do think that, the things for like people to be focusing on that are like e-commerce brands and their agencies, I think it is that speed of data. And if you are still running things like a manual feed and you are having to do an export, which then has to import into Merchant Center or your tool, that's going to hold you back a lot when it comes to this new sort of world, particularly when it is onto the agentic side of things, because you're going to be so much further behind people that are automating their feeds, that are making those updates really quickly, that have that sort of infrastructure in place. So it is going to lean a little bit more towards the brands, I think, who have the infrastructure there and who've invested that money and that time into putting that into place, which is a little bit unfair in terms of like, there might be smaller retailers that haven't been able to do that. So it might be it might exclude them a little bit, but I think we've got a bit of time now before, hopefully, at least before it rolls out in the UK. I think the US is a bit more pressing. But I would be encouraging people to look at the automated solutions and try and work that out for their sites. And I know it's not as easy as just flipping a switch for a lot of people. So yeah, I do think that's going to be a big thing is getting that infrastructure in place before this sort of thing rolls out in wider markets, because it could hamstring quite a lot of people.
Yeah, if there's anything, if AI overviews are anything to go by, then it will definitely be 3 to 4, 5 months, something like that, is when it arrives in the UK. And I would put money on by the end of the year we have AI mode in the UK. Like absolute, bet my life savings, house, both cats. Like there's that real kind of, I don't know, like the slow adoption of it all and all that kind of thing we were talking about earlier. But I think there's also a nature of being aware of it, like you said, getting ahead of the game and all that kind of thing, exactly as we were talking about in the first half of the episode. And I think there's kind of two sides to that. You mentioned big brands. I'm actually thinking about from the small side of things. Often small brands are way more agile than the big brands, but it's fairly proven and essentially confirmed by Google at this point that Google already favors the big brands in terms of rankings and in terms of visibility on search. We're pretty convinced by a lot of the data that most LLMs do the same thing as well. So if they're not able to be as agile and imagine an enormous multi-billion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar company conglomerate that has hundreds of million, now talking your language, right, Alex, like big companies with international stock and all this kind of stuff, and it's going to take a long time to update any kind of inventory or anything like that just because of the sheer numbers. If I come in with 100 products that are super specialized compared to your 10,000 products that are all over the world, can I sneak in there and get maybe a little bit quicker? And like, would I get that ranking just because I've got a better price? I don't know. I'm fascinated. I'm intrigued. Maybe it's
Yeah,
David and Goliath.
I really, really hope that there is a lot, still that diversification in products. But like you said, I'm a little bit worried that there will be. It'll be lopsided towards those bigger brands and things like that, and that would be a massive shame, I think, for consumers, because the variety is like what makes search, I think, in a lot of ways, and being able to access products from brands that you might be better aligned with, or that have those extra features, or like you said, they're a bit more specialized than sort of the generic mass-produced stuff. I think that'd be a massive shame if AI mode does lead to the sort of, I guess, monopolization of search. But you would hope that even if it does start that way, I'm still, again, maybe hopelessly optimistic. I'd hope that might get refined over time. But it's something that maybe small brands need to think about. But again, I think we spoke about this as well. Like the branding side of things might become a lot more important. So getting people to think of your brand as something that they search for when they search for a specific product, or even when looking for like the specialized features, making sure they're included in queries and things, and maybe that impacting the way people search, because you would hope, again, that would surface those more specialized, probably more helpful products in a lot of ways. But
that's again connecting those two dots, right? With the more conversational, specific, really focused intent kind of search we seem to be heading towards as an industry and as a technology using species, almost, like, to go very big picture about it. That almost seems like you would be favoring those really specific results. If I'm looking for a really, really specific thing, I was just chatting to one of our account managers earlier today. We were comparing like image analysis from different LLMs with, he took a photo of a car, like 3 cars in front of him and on the lane to the left. And it's not really like the focus of the image. There's 2 cars in front of him and there's also the other lane. And asking what type of car is that car, and trying to explain where that car is in that image, in an image full of other cars, was way more difficult than we thought it was. Just a little thing like that of, what is this car in the middle of this image? And I was like, how are you defining the middle? Like, what does that mean? How much is that the center pixel and nothing else? Or is that 500, like a 50 by 50 square? The middle is such a fake thing. You have to be specific with this kind of stuff to get results. And we ended up literally zooming in, screenshotting just that car and getting results, because we could not do it from the sea of information you send it. And if we're getting towards a more specific search style, a conversational style, especially for products, I want something that kind of looks like this, or what was that part? Like, imagine you're walking behind somebody and people start like, oh, what trainers is Alex wearing? I'm going to like walk behind him with my Gemini Live and just like work out, instead of asking you like a normal person, oh, I saw Alex was wearing a cool shirt at Brighton, and maybe I'll just take a photo of him like a creep and scan it. Like,
well, that's a really good point, actually. I think probably, I mean, not quite the future facing stuff, maybe a little bit, but Google Lens and the way that's come on in the last few years, I think there's a lot of people that overlook just how much people search like that as well. And I got a little bit obsessed with it, I'm not gonna lie, at one point, and started trying, talking to people about how they search and how many people use Google Lens. And I was quite surprised at the amount of people that would take like an image of a celebrity or someone they've seen on social media, screenshot it and throw it into Google Lens to try and find out what the clothing is, or where they can buy that. But something else that I thought was quite prevalent, which was when I started looking at referral data or revenue data in some GA accounts, what I found was that Google Lens is actually driving more revenue in some cases than ChatGPT, or in many cases than ChatGPT. Maybe not so much anymore. It depends on the brand and the product, but it was actually something that people weren't even really thinking about, and it was driving revenue. It was just a little bit hidden in terms of where you can find it in GA. But yeah, that sort of being able to search like that and that being a bit more native, I think that's actually been around, or maybe been around for longer than we think, but it probably will become a lot easier and a lot more native now that AI mode and, like I said, the Gemini Live mode are becoming a bit more front and center.
Yeah, definitely. I think demo they did at Google I/O was almost like a bit too tongue-in-cheek to actually demonstrate the capabilities. Like, again, it was the conversation I was having with our account manager earlier, was they did the whole like, oh, wow, that's what kind of convertible is that? It's like, that's a garbage truck. It's like, yeah, we get it. Like, it almost felt like the dig at ChatGPT being too agreeable and just being
Yeah.
like, yes, you're right. Sorry, I'm wrong. You're always right, Mr. User. Let me please you as your robot slave. It's like, great. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, ChatGPT. And then literally Sundar said, like, Gemini isn't afraid to disagree with you and tell you when you're wrong. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. You're being a bit silly here. How does that actually work in real life? And I'm so glad you brought up Google Lens. Like, this technology is here a lot of the time already in many ways. And I think it was February this year, the number was 20 billion searches a month on Lens alone, which is like, again, when you put that into perspective of every other search possibility, that dwarfs basically every other search engine already, right? And that's just the Lens component of Google. And I think a lot of us underestimate how many people are doing that kind of stuff. I was having a really interesting conversation. I mentioned to you before we start recording. At time of recording, it'll be the next episode, is a big panel about AI mode and all this kind of stuff. And Miriam Jessier brought up a really interesting topic where they're thinking about real world readability of product information. How to make your products more recognizable to things like Lens and LLMs. So we're then like in some weird reverse digital marketing thing where you're making physical things for robots to understand, and it's like full matrix type stuff. And it wasn't just like, oh, speculation. Miriam literally had an example. They were in the Netherlands for a conference and needed to work out if this like breakfast cereal, porridge, granola type stuff had milk in it, or you needed to add milk because they need to know, do I need to add oat milk? I'm vegan. Like, I don't want to add, if it already has cow's milk, I don't want to drink it, or you use it as breakfast. And it couldn't translate the letters from Dutch to English because the contrast between the letters and the packaging wasn't high enough. It was real like eco brand, everything's kind of off-white, cream and beige and brown. And it was like off-white cream on a light brown background. And it's like, good luck. It picked up oat and breakfast, and that was it. It's like, brilliant. Your product won't work on Google Lens, by the way. Like, I had never thought of that. That is a really, we're going to have to reshape the way, like, multimodal search means we need to reshape our real world to fit digital requirements. We've been doing the opposite for like 30 years. It's blowing my mind.
That's like real world accessibility,
Right.
Products passive accessibility guidelines. That is, that's huge. I mean, that's again, I hadn't even really considered that. So you can imagine that, there might be even a reason now to be talking to the people that design packaging for the products, which I probably wonder why someone from digital is trying to talk to them. But I mean, there's a significant upside. If you think, like you said, think about the volume of things that go through Google Lens, and the amount of those that might be, transactional or product related queries as well, or product related images.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you're scanning ingredients, that's a pretty clear intent to buy, right? Mm-hmm. That is, if you have the ingredients, I'm probably buying it. If you don't, I'm not buying it. There is like a pretty clear, or maybe not quite 50-50 directly, but pretty binary option there of, well, if it has cow's milk, I'm not getting it. If it doesn't, great, sounds good. And you could lose sales because your thing is not readable by Google Lens. I was like, that has melted my brain. And oh no, this is the start of the end of everything as we know it. Like, that felt like such a weird, scary, but like, yeah, of course, that totally makes sense. And I think we so often see, like I said, the tongue-in-cheek options. And again, I know you and I talked about the European Accessibility Act that's coming up very soon as well. That's a huge thing that more people need to be talking about in a digital space. And oh no, now we need to think about it in a physical space as well, which is good because everything should be accessible, for the record. Like, that's how everything should be anyway. It should be the default, but it's not. And that's a problem. And it's not just, turns out it might not just be a problem for users with visual impairments or various disabilities and things like that. It can be an issue for robots as well, which is such a weird thing to say.
Yeah, we'll go into the realms of creating content for robots and not humans, which
we're already there, mate. I think it feels like we're already there.
Having to train myself to do that, do the opposite for many years, that's going to be
I
a
know.
hard one to break out of.
We've had right for humans, not for robots, just absolutely drilled into us for the last 15 years. And then now it's like, well, yeah, kind of need to worry about what the robots are seeing.
Yeah, now do it for the
Okay,
robots because
fine.
they'll control what the
Yeah.
humans see. Yeah.
The agents are taking over again.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm just using the Matrix analogy, but there are a reason they're called agents in the Matrix. Like that.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing. Let's finish off with some recommendations then, shall we, Alex? I want to get some nice little recommendations for the listeners and viewers to go and check out. Is there anything actionable that they can do right now that you would recommend them do to basically get a upper hand on SEO, essentially?
On upper hand in SEO, I guess for me, it's starting to look into what kind of things might be driving the future of search, and like actionable wise, like think about how that fits into your analysis moving forward. There's been some really good articles recently on the types of technology that's driving search. So I think the types of technology that drives LLMs and how they work, I think that's my actionable tip to people, is to really get up to speed with that. I think because we're at such an inflection point in the industry and we're starting to see so much change, I think actually just understanding the underlying tech sometimes can make things make a lot more sense. So like, as an example, when I first started learning SEO, I went really heavy into information retrieval, and that actually helped me to make sense of a lot of the stuff that was happening in search. So I'm hoping that the similar thing will transfer. Understanding how LLMs work and the sort of technology behind those will help you to understand a lot more about what's going on in search in the future as well, or make sense of some of the things that you might have to do.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we talked about how much we enjoy Dawn Anderson and all the amazing stuff she talks about when it comes to IR and how that all ties into the web as we know it and the structure of everything. It's like, it just blows my mind every time.
I think when I first started learning about it, I had a reading list I collated from things that Dawn had recommended. So yeah, definitely a source to look at if you want to understand information retrieval.
Lovely. Next up, a tool or a piece of software that maybe people aren't aware of or maybe should be using a bit more.
Well, I think for me, the tool I always bang on about quite a bit is SE ranking. It does get a fair bit of attention, I think, but the tool is really solid. There's a lot of good features to it as well. I think it is competitive in terms of some of the other tools that are out there. And the one thing I would say about that, the tool and the team behind SE ranking, is when you give them feedback, they actually action it, and they're very quick to do so. So yeah, I think that's one that I think deserves plaudits, and yeah, I would say also asked, but I feel like I feel like people should know that that's a good tool by now.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. Appreciate that. But yeah, absolutely. SEO ranking are awesome. We've worked with the guys. They've sponsored the show before. They've done brilliant stuff, like you said. It feels like they're an active part of the community. And again, not talking about it on any other tools. I know plenty of other people. I'm friends with many people who work in big SaaS companies and stuff like that. It comes back to that agility we were talking about, right? That ability to get direct feedback and actually say, oh no, yeah, that makes sense. And well, if multiple people in the industry are saying that, we should look into it, rather than we'll get around to it eventually. We'll chuck a dev ticket, 10, 12 months in the future and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely.
And last but not least, doesn't have to be SEO related. Something you've enjoyed recently is what I try and call this little recommendation. Could be a video, YouTube video, or a book, or a podcast, or whatever you like, mate. What you've been enjoying recently?
Okay. I guess article probably still would be SEO related, because I think that's what's been dominating my reading list at the moment. But Mike King's recent article on how AI mode works, I think is a really nice one. And definitely, like I said before about understanding the underlying tech, that's took a lot of my. I've read and reread the article a few times recently, and I think it is one for people to look at.
Yeah, I love breaking down the patent side of things is always so interesting to me. I know, again, Mark here at Candour has been working on that as well, doing the SEO patent podcast where you kind of digest it into little bits and pieces. And I always try and give him a shout out whenever I can. The late Bill Slavsky, who did such amazing work with SEO by the Sea, that was such a formative learning experience for me, trying to, like you said, I'm going to get into weird technical stuff and try and work out how this stuff works. Seeing the stuff that Google has already patented, like 5, 4, 10 years ago, whatever it is, It's like, oh, that might be the future of search right there. And there's literally a document that explains how it works, but nobody's digging around really and looking at it.
Yeah, I think that was such a service to the industry that Bill did. It's amazing that we've got that, we had that sort of resource, and Mark's podcast is really, really good as well. I'd encourage people to listen to that because, like you said, patents are definitely a bit of an indicator sometimes of what might be going on in the background of different techs.
Yeah, and I love, like you said, Mike's write-up is really interesting, combining so many different patents into a single actual digestible, engageable thing, because good Lord, patent language is boring and dry. And if you're trying to learn the thing as well as read that kind of super heavy technical language, it can be not fun on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming back, mate. It's been a pleasure to have another conversation with you. Where are the best places to find you, what you're up to in SEO, what Dentsu's up to, and all that good stuff?
So I guess the best place to find me more actively is LinkedIn. So hopefully, I think there'll be a link in the show notes. But LinkedIn is probably where I post the most. There's a personal website that is broken a lot of the time, so it's because I use it to test and things like that. But that's personal stuff that you can find me on. And then obviously the Dentsu website as well. I was sharing some more updates on things that happened recently. Those are a few places to take a look at. And I've just had an article, my first article published on the Dentsu website. A roundup of Google I/O if people are interested.
Hey, nice. Congratulations, mate. Lovely stuff. I'll put links for everything, the Dentsu blog, put links for Mike's breakdown and everything mentioned. I'll try and get all of the Google documentation bits and pieces as well and piece that all together as much as we can. So plenty of resources and stuff to go and check out down below, folks. And once again, Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's great to come back.
And that wraps up this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alex Wright as much as I did. Hope you're feeling a little bit more informed about organic shopping feeds and how to properly use them in 2025 and what the future could look like for a lot of agentic search and AI mode and all that good stuff as well, since that topic is basically unavoidable at the moment, as I am very quickly learning throughout 2025. Of course, like I said at the start of the show, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you made it all the way to the end, I would hugely appreciate you letting me know what you think of the show. Give me some feedback, send me some comments, all that good stuff. And like I said, the next couple of weeks are also star-studded. Alex Galinos next week, and the following week at the end of August, the one and only Seb Atkinson back here in the studio talking all about his keyword clustering method and how you can kind of assign revenue to your SEO work and get buy-in from clients and stakeholders really, really well. Like I said, in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I will be basically doing some really cool stuff over the next couple of months. Lots of cool, interesting new formats, new episodes, new guests, new interviews, all that fun stuff. And I'm even working on some video content for Candour and for our various different things like Also Asked and things like that as well. So stay tuned on all of our social pages, our YouTube channels, and all that good stuff if you don't already. And in the meantime, have a lovely week, and I will see you next week.